The night I realized my boss was just as trapped as I was, the snow was already swallowing the road behind us. My name is Evan Hayes. I am 27, and for the last 3 years I have been grinding away as a junior architect at Westlake Design in Seattle. It is one of those firms where every line you draw feels judged before it even touches the screen. One mistake can follow you for years. I live alone in a cramped one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city, with thin walls and a view of my neighbor's overflowing dumpster. Most days blur together. Drafting software. Endless revisions. Cold coffee at midnight. I am not proud of the life, but I worked hard for it. I graduated from the University of Washington thinking I would change skylines. Instead, I learned how heavy reality can feel. A big reason for that weight has a name. Alexandra Reed. She is the head of the design department. Early 40s. Sharp in every sense of the word. Around the office, people call her the steel wall when they think she cannot hear. I have watched her destroy full presentations with a single raised eyebrow. Her voice is calm, but it cuts like winter air. Tall, poised, dark hair always pulled back tight. Eyes that feel like they see through you and into every flaw you try to hide. I admired her work, of course. Everyone did, but she terrified me. In 3 years, our relationship had been limited to her red pen tearing through my blueprints and me nodding, promising I would do better next time. I had never seen her smile outside a client meeting. Rumors said she was divorced, married only to her career now. I believed it. She felt untouchable, unbreakable. So when the company announced the annual winter retreat, I was not excited. It was supposed to be a team-building getaway to a resort in the Cascade Mountains. Bonding. Brainstorming. Relaxing. In reality, it meant forced conversations and pretending not to check emails. The forecast warned of a big storm, but HR brushed it off, confident we would reach the lodge before anything serious hit. We did not. The bus left Seattle on a gray Friday afternoon. I sat near the back, scrolling through emails, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. Alexandra sat near the front, laptop open, already working. The drive climbed through thick evergreen forests. Snow started light, almost pretty. Then, it thickened fast. Visibility dropped. The bus slowed until it crawled. Murmurs filled the cabin. Finally, the driver pulled over near a small cluster of roadside cabins buried in snow. The storm was worse than expected. We would have to wait it out. We were told to pair up and grab a cabin. I ended up with the last key. "You're with Reed," a coworker said, smirking as he handed it to me. My stomach dropped. Alexandra was already walking toward the cabins, snow dusting her coat, expression unreadable. I followed, wind slicing my face. Our cabin sat farthest from the road, small and half-buried. Inside was basic. A fireplace, a table, 2 chairs, a tiny kitchen, 1 bedroom, 1 bed. No signal, no heat. We stood there for a moment as the storm screamed outside. She checked her phone, then sighed. We would be here overnight, at least. I offered to start a fire. She nodded. I gathered wood, went back out into the storm and returned soaked and shaking. When I came back inside, peeling off my wet jacket, I saw something I had never seen on her face before. Concern. "You should change before you freeze," she said quietly. Later, we sat across from each other with protein bars and weak tea, the fire crackling between us. No boss, no employee, just 2 people stuck. The silence felt heavy, but different. The storm pressed in from all sides, isolating us from the rest of the world. As the night deepened and the fire warmed the room, Alexandra finally spoke. She asked why I chose architecture. Not as a supervisor. As a person. I told her about my father, about job sites, about wanting to build something that lasted. She listened. Really listened. Then she told me about herself, about being the only woman in her cohort, about her divorce, about building walls to survive. The steel wall cracked. Hours passed. The storm did not stop. When it was time to sleep, I took the couch. She took the bed. But the cold grew brutal. Sometime after midnight, she came out wrapped in a blanket, worry in her eyes. "The bed is warmer," she said softly. "It's big enough for two. We need to stay warm." And standing there, freezing, heart pounding, I realized this night was going to change everything. We lay on opposite sides of the bed at first, stiff and careful, like the space between us was marked by an invisible line neither of us dared cross. The mattress creaked softly every time one of us shifted. The room was dark, lit only by the faint orange glow slipping under the door from the dying fire outside. The storm howled against the cabin, shaking the windows like it was trying to tear its way inside. I could hear Alexandra breathing, slow but not asleep. I knew she was awake. I was wide awake too, my heart beating far louder than the wind. "This is strange," she said quietly after a long stretch of silence. I let out a small breath. Yeah, not exactly how I imagined a company retreat. She surprised me with a soft laugh. It was low and real, not the polite office sound I had heard in meetings. "Me neither," she said, "but I suppose the mountains had other plans." The cold still lingered, even under the blankets. Without thinking too much, I shifted slightly closer, careful not to touch her. After a moment, she moved too. Our shoulders brushed. Neither of us pulled away. The warmth helped, but it was more than that. It felt grounding, like the world had shrunk down to just this room and the truth between us. "I worry I scared you tonight," she said suddenly. I turned my head toward her voice. "You didn't scare me. You surprised me." "How so?" "I've only ever known you as my boss, the woman who never misses a detail. Tonight you felt human." She was quiet for a moment. Then she sighed. "I don't allow myself to be that very often. It costs too much." Her words settled heavy in my chest. I thought about the way she had held herself at work, always composed, always guarded. "You don't have to be steel all the time," I said. "Not with me, at least not tonight." Her breath caught. Slowly she rolled onto her side, facing me. I could just make out the shape of her face in the dark. "You say that now," she whispered, "but tomorrow we go back to Seattle, back to rules." "I know," I said, "but tonight is still real." She hesitated, then reached out, her fingers brushing my arm. The touch was light, almost unsure. I stayed still, letting her decide. A second later, her hand rested there, warm and steady. That simple contact sent a rush through me stronger than the fire ever could. "I haven't felt this safe in a long time," she said. "That scares me more than the storm." "It doesn't have to," I replied. "We're just two people trying to get through the night." She shifted closer, resting her forehead lightly against my shoulder. I wrapped an arm around her, slow and careful, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into me, her body relaxing like she had been holding herself tight for years and finally let go. Outside, the wind screamed. Inside, everything felt quiet. She told me more then. About her marriage. About how losing it made her afraid of wanting anything that wasn't work. About how she built her reputation like armor because it hurt less than hoping. I listened, not trying to fix anything, just being there. When she cried softly against my chest, I held her tighter. Not as her employee, not as someone beneath her, just as a man who cared. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She fell asleep in my arms. I stayed awake longer, staring into the darkness, my thoughts racing. I knew this crossed lines. I knew tomorrow would come with questions and consequences. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel small in her presence. I felt chosen, trusted. When sleep finally took me, it came gently. Morning arrived quietly. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside frozen and bright. Sunlight spilled through the window, painting everything in soft white. I woke to find Alexandra still asleep, her hand gripping my shirt like she was afraid I might disappear. For a moment, I didn't move. I just watched her. Without the tension, without the walls, she looked younger, peaceful. When her eyes opened, they met mine instantly. There was no panic, no regret. just a quiet understanding that something important had begun, whether we were ready for it or not. And as we lay there, listening to the silence left behind by the storm, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, neither of us would ever be the same. The rescue came late that morning, but the hardest part was not waiting for the plows. It was pretending nothing had changed. We stepped out of the cabin together when we heard engines in the distance. Snowmobiles and a snowplow carved their way through the drifts, men in heavy jackets waving as they approached. The air was painfully cold, but my chest felt warm in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Alexandra stood beside me, her posture already shifting back toward the version of herself the world knew. Calm, professional, guarded. But when our eyes met, there was something new there. Something unspoken. The bus ride back to the resort was loud with laughter and exaggerated survival stories. People joked about bad food and no signal. No one asked what it was like sharing a cabin with a steel wall. Alexandra and I sat a few rows apart. We did not speak, we did not touch, but every time the bus hit a bump, our eyes found each other without effort. It felt like holding a secret in plain sight. Seattle hit us fast. Gray skies, wet streets, the familiar weight of routine. Monday morning, I walked into the office half convinced the night in the mountains had been a dream. Alexandra was already in the conference room when I arrived, hair pulled back tight, voice sharp, pointing out flaws in a proposal. She did not look at me once. It hurt more than I expected. Days passed like that. Weeks. We were careful. Painfully careful. At work, she was my boss again. No softness. No late glances. Just deadlines and red ink. I told myself that was how it had to be. That the storm had created a moment, not a future. Then one evening, my phone buzzed as I was packing up to leave. Unknown number. Are you free for coffee? No work talk. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I knew it was her. We met at a quiet cafe across town, far from the office crowd. She wore jeans and a sweater, her hair loose. She looked nervous. I had never seen that before. We talked for hours about everything we had avoided since the mountain, about how real it felt, about how scared we both were. "This can't be careless," she said. "If we do this, it has to be right." "I don't want to be a secret," I replied, "but I don't want to hurt either of us." She nodded. "Neither do I." That was when she told me her plan. She would request a transfer to another team. Same level, different reporting line. It would take time, but it would remove the biggest barrier between us. I did not argue. I respected her too much for that. Instead, I reached across the table and took her hand. This time, she did not hesitate. The transfer was approved a month later. After that, we stopped hiding so much. We still kept things professional at work, but outside the office we let ourselves exist. Dinners that lasted too long. Walks through the city where she talked about things she had never shared with anyone. Nights where she admitted how lonely strength can be. Nights where I admitted how small I had felt for years, and how seen she made me feel. People noticed. Of course they did. The whispers started. The looks. The questions disguised as jokes. Some thought I was lucky. Others thought I was foolish. A few thought she was reckless. None of them mattered. What mattered was how she looked at me when she was tired. How she leaned into me when the world felt heavy. How she learned, slowly, to stop apologizing for needing someone. The real test came when her ex reached out. One message, then another. Old doubts surfaced. Old wounds reopened. She pulled back for a while, afraid of repeating history, afraid of losing herself again. I did not chase. I stayed steady. "I'm not here to take your strength," I told her one night. "I'm here to stand beside it." That was the night she finally let go of the last wall. By the time summer arrived, we were no longer pretending this was temporary. It was not perfect. We argued. We struggled. But we chose each other every day. And still, neither of us knew how far this choice would take us. Not yet. The proposal was not planned. There was no dramatic setup, no crowd, no perfect timing. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning when the rain tapped softly against the windows of our small rented house outside the city. Alexandra was sitting at the kitchen island, sketching absent-mindedly while I made coffee. She looked peaceful in a way that still caught me off guard. Not the steel wall. Not the executive. Just her. I set the mugs down and stood there longer than necessary, my heart pounding. She looked up, sensing something was different. I did not kneel. I did not give a speech. I slid the small ring across the counter and said the only words that felt honest. Will you build the rest of this life with me? She froze. Then her eyes filled with tears, the kind that come from relief, not fear. She nodded before she even spoke. Yes, she said, voice shaking. I choose you. I choose us. We told people slowly. Some were surprised, some were skeptical, a few were openly judgmental. The age difference, the office history, the power balance that once existed. We faced it all together. Alexandra stood firm but softer now. I stood taller than I ever had before. We did not hide. We did not apologize. 3 months later, life surprised us again. She stood in the doorway one evening, holding a small test with trembling hands. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she laughed through tears and said, "Apparently, the universe isn't done rewriting my plans." The pregnancy was not easy. Fear crept in. Doubts about timing, about age, about whether she could be both the woman she had built and the mother she was becoming. I watched her struggle, and for the first time she let me carry her weight without resistance. Our son was born in July. Liam arrived loud and stubborn, with her eyes on my chin. The first time I held him, everything else faded. Deadlines, titles, fear. All of it felt small compared to the life breathing against my chest. Alexandra cried when she saw me with him, not from sadness, but from something healing. Motherhood changed her, not by making her weaker, but by reminding her that softness is not failure. She returned to work on her terms. I was promoted. Our paths still crossed professionally, but now as equals, supported by mutual respect instead of fear. Some evenings, we sit on our porch while Liam toddles through the grass. Alexandra sketches while I watch the light fade behind the trees. Sometimes we talk about that night on the mountain, about how close we came to missing everything because we were afraid. The storm did not trap us, it freed us. What began as survival became choice. What began as fear became trust. We did not break the rules carelessly. We rewrote them honestly. And every night, when the house is quiet and the world finally slows down, she rests her head on my shoulder and reminds me of the truth we learned the hard way. Warmth is not found in walls. It is found in letting someone in.